Hi, welcome to class number 3, part 1 for mobile interactive app programming for the 2015 International Summer University. In this video lecture, we will talk about intents, which I think this is a fascinating topic. Now, I think you might recall from previous video lectures that when we were talking about an Android application, we said that an Android application has four components. One of those components is an activity. And then we said that activity is visible to the user and it has a user interface and it has and then the user interacts with that. The other components were like broadcast receivers that, for example, is waiting for an event to happen. Like, for example, if somebody unplugs the headphones or there is a text message coming or the phone rings, for example, or service when something happens on the background so it's not visible, or the content providers. That's another possible component that has information available for other applications, right? So our concern for this course is just an Android application that has one activity. Now applications usually has multiple activities, but for each activity we need some type of you also remember that we were talking about two files before, a Java file and an XML file. And the XML file, we were using that for the interface, remember, and the Java is the class that has the code that was needed for that activity. When we create an intent, the intent is basically like an instance of that class that we're going to need, and then we're going to start an activity using that. So basically an intent, that's what we will say, and that's what this is fascinating. The intent is like the way that we um, use use it to start other activities. So for every activity, like I said, we need an instance of that class, and then we start the activity. So it's what we call the messaging system. Now, like I say, most applications have multiple activities, and you can see those like the kind of like an interface. Like, for example, you have some, I don't know, some screen on your app, and then you do something there, and then that takes you to another screen of another view or another interface. So that probably is associated with another Java code. So that's another activity. So activities usually request the launch of another activity within the same application. So this is very common. You got multiple activities. But there is something that's interesting, that maybe we request to start an activity that it just has been, I mean, the whatever is the action that we want is already registered. Like, for example, we want to open a web page. Let's say an activity wants to open a web page. We could create in our app another activity that contains a web view and then open the page over there. That's one option. Or we can send a request and says, okay, this is my intent. Can you find one that has registered, like, for example, an activity that opens a web page when we provide a URL. So this is interesting too. So that's in that case we will have those two options. Um, Something interesting too is that when an activity starts another activity, we can also provide some data. That's also fascinating, and the code that is involved is also fascinating. That you have that, and then we can also decide that the previous activity we want to still keep that activity alive in the background. Maybe we want to go back. Maybe we want, yes. I mean, there is a lot of things that we can do in programming. Um, Now, this is just like general information to you, and tests can also be used to launch broadcast receivers and communicate with services, right? So remember that's all the other components. Again, we will be concerned on an application that has just an activity. Now, the last thing that we need to know is that activities can be either explicit or implicit. So let's see. Let's, this is the final part of this presentation, and this is important. So the activity is kind of, the intent is kind of the action of what I want to do in my activity. So for that, I create like an instance of that Java class, and then I call the start activity, and then now I say explicit and implicit. Let's talk more about that. Okay, explicit activities. This is very common, and this is the best example of understanding, I think, the idea of an intent. So, in this case, request the launch of a specific activity, and then here is we actually said, okay, it is uh, the activity that is refer as a the specific Java class. I mean, it's something that we were actually programming, and this is what we expect that is going to happen in this type of activity. So that's, I think, common sense. So this is very common in the case that we got multiple activities within the same application, and then the developer is the one that is writing the code for each one of those, right? So the developer knows the name of those Java files associated. So what we're doing is basically creating an intent that is associated with that file. Okay, so the main thing is that the explicit intent is creating a new instance of the intent class. So, and then we're gonna use that, we're gonna call that into the start activity method. So look into this example. So here I is my type intent. So we're creating one intent for the activity, and this is the name of the Java file, activity B, for example. Okay, then here we start activity I. So I is an instance of this class. So this piece of code is beautiful, I think. So here is just the class, and then we're creating that, and then we start the activity. Boom, we got that um, activity already. Now, something that's interesting that we don't need for the example that we're going to be working on is we can send some data, right? So we got, so maybe you were manipulating some data and you need to send the data to the next activity. So that's probably something that may be needed, and then there will be a way of doing this. Like in this example, I mean, we create the activity. Here the intent is I. Then uh, we got the um, I mean, we instantiating I here, and then we have the, for that particular object I, then we're adding, in this case, a string. So this is what we say that there is a key value thing. So this is like the name of the variable that I'm passing, and this is the value in that case. And then, I mean here, this is an int that we're passing, and then the value is going to be 100, right? And then we start the activity. Then we can further discuss, but we don't need, I mean, this just gives you an idea. We could further discuss what I said is how is that the other activity will read that, right? It's going to be something that is the bundle, and then we go and look the information from there. But I mean, we don't need to discuss that here. Now, when we have multiple activities when the same application, we list those activities. So I don't know, you can see this manifest file, but okay, there will be basically three files. That's the only thing that we need to understand when we create the type of apps that we need. So the manifest file, the XML file for the user interface, and a Java file for the activity. So those three, and then maybe occasionally we're gonna need another file that contains values like a string XML file. But remember, we can place some data for the value of the strings, which is not required. So here, this XML file, it is the opening here of the XML file, and then here you say there is a manifest, opens here, the opening tag and the closing tag is over here. So you see where inside a manifest is the definition of an application. You see that opens here, the opening of the object for the application, and then it closes here. Now inside, remember there are four components, right? We can define services, broadcast receivers, content providers, and activities. So in this case, this application contains two activities. How do I know that there are two activities? Well, here it talks about something about the application, but then here you see activity, and then here there is an activity and another activity. So for this activity, here it specifies the um, the type of I mean the name of the activity, and then where it's going to be located, the file, and then here is kind of describing the type of action, which in this case is the saying that this is the main activity. It's going to be the launcher. That means when the application starts. If we got multiple activities, the application needs to know, where should I start? Well, this is the starting point. This is the activity that when we start the app, this is the starting activity. And then here is another activity. So I'm guessing in this case, this activity somehow will have to call this activity. You see, it's making a reference to activity. I think it says B. That must be also the name of the Java file or whatever. But here is the definition of the activity. So here in the manifest, it says, okay, there are going to be two activities. Okay, now let's talk about the other type of intents. So we said we got explicit and we got implicit. Explicit, it was really simple because like here we say the explicit, they will making a reference to a Java class of the activity, right? And then in this case, what we specify is the action, and I don't know where the uh, file, or I mean, in my other example, in the explicit, I say, look, this is what I want. I want this file that is located here and here, and I give you the exact location of where the file is, and this is what I want. In an implicit, I'm not telling you that. I'm just saying this is what I need. I need to open, I don't know, a web page. I need to dial the phone. So I could create my own, but that would be complicated, right? I mean, I can, but maybe there is already an app that dials the phone. So maybe I can just say, hey, can you find an application, I mean, an activity that dials the phone? It may be that there is more. Let me see, this is